Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Don Gulling, CEO of Verteks Consulting. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your attendance, and we're looking forward to covering Mitel Connect, kind of power user tips and tricks and training. We collaborated with Steve Hall, our most long-term Mitel support engineer, and he came up with a great agenda. I feel like we have some excellent content to share with you. Please feel free to again, use the chat and questions. We'll include what we can. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
All right, thanks, Don, and good afternoon, everyone. As Don mentioned, today we're going to do kind of a deeper dive, a thorough look into the Mitel Connect client, and hopefully provide everyone with some new information, show them how to do some things that maybe not everyone knew about. Agenda, just to kind of review what we've got on board for today. I'm going to start out with some just how do you install the software, how do you get logged in, how do you navigate around the client, orientation to the client, what are the different options and settings that are available, and also kind of as we go through some power user features, some features that not everyone makes use of, but they can certainly be helpful. And then finally, some options for getting help or troubleshooting if something's not working right. So with that, let me minimize the slideshow here and jump right into the client. All right, and the first thing I'd like to point out, in a lot of environments, the network administrator may have automatically deployed the software to all the users' computers, and so you may already have it installed. If you don't have it installed, kind of the easiest place to find it is to navigate to your Mitel Connect server, the server that runs your phone system, the HQ server, if you're familiar with that term. In our case, that is cdirector.verteks.com. When that URL pulls up, you'll see you have an option here to download the Connect for Windows, or you can download Connect for Mac. The Mac and the Windows client are essentially the same, and then you can install them both from this page. Installation is very straightforward. It doesn't ask you any questions during the installation. Kind of a next situation. Once the software is installed, you will see the blue Mitel icon, looks like a handset icon. And actually, sorry, let me log out of this. This is where I wanted to start here. When you launch the software for the first time, once again, we do have some options for network administrators that can enable automatic login so that users can bypass the screen without entering any username and password. If you're integrated with your Active Directory, Windows Active Directory accounts, we can skip right past the login screen. But if you do need to specify that, when you first launch the software, you're going to be presented with this login screen here. I'm going to click Show Advanced so we can see all the different options. Real simple, you got your username, password. If you are using Windows AD credentials and Windows integration, you can check the box there so that you don't have to fill anything in. It'll fill that in for you. Otherwise, you can come down here and put in the server name or IP address of your server to log in. And then finally, the Remember Me checkbox, you definitely want to select that if you're logging in here so that you don't have to type in that password every day. And the next time you launch the software, it's going to log you right in. So I'm going to go ahead and log in myself. All right, once you're logged into the Connect client, this is basically what you're going to see. There are some different options depending on what license you have available. Starting at the very top, we have the quick dialer screen up here. This searches the entire company directory, as well as if you're integrated with your Outlook contacts, it'll search your Outlook contacts as well. You can search basically any way that makes sense to you. You can search by first name, last name, email address, extension number. You can also search by like the first initial and last initial, or the first two initials and last two initials. So for an example of that, let me do like an S and a K, and we'll find Scott Kazmarski in our office here. That's one way to search. Once I found someone that I want to call, I can select that contact. You'll see their contact card with some information here. I can simply click the green dial to make that call. While I'm showing the quick dialer, I want to show a live call here. That call went to voicemail, so I'm going to do another call here. I'm going to call, have a contact I created here with my cell phone, so I can select this one, call this one, So when you're on a live call, you're going to see a couple different things. You're going to see the call down here in your active calls pane at the bottom. You've got some simple options here to end the call, put the call on hold, mute the call. If you select that call, or in this case, since I dialed that call from here, you're going to have the call details pane over here. This gives you some more options. If, for example, you wanted to conference, in this case, we'll do a transfer of the call. Select transfer. I'm going to show a couple different ways to transfer, but in this case, we can type a name or extension. Let's go for Scott again. I can select him from the list. Have an option of doing a transfer, or what's called a blind transfer, a consultative transfer if I want to speak to Scott before I send the call to him. If I have the permissions, I can do an intercom transfer, come over to speakerphone. Also have an option to park the call on his extension if I want to, send it to his voicemail. In this case, I'm just going to do a blind transfer and send that call off. So that's a simple making a call, transferring a call from the quick dialer screen. As we move down, the next thing I want to show here is the availability states. So most of you are probably familiar with the availability states and what those can do. You can have different voicemail greetings for different availability states. You can have different call handling enabled, forward to your cell phone, forward to someone else in the office, those sorts of options. But to change availability states, you can just select this and select, whichever availability state you want to go into to turn that on. Also, one thing that sometimes doesn't get seen is if you ever need to log out of the client, the logout is under the availability state menu there. That one is kind of hard to find sometimes. Let me go back to available here. All right, moving down, the next thing we have is the contacts. Contacts are, very handy. This is similar to having, buttons on your phone that show when someone's on the phone or off the phone. In this case, we've got, let me go to my favorites first, because that's what you start out with if you don't have any groups. So favorites are all of the contacts that I have designated as a favorite by going up to the quick dialer again. And if I search for someone up here, I can put a star next to their name. And when I put a star next to their name, that's going to add them to my favorites. So they come back to contacts. I now have that listed here in my favorites. Once you get beyond a certain number of favorites, it makes sense to organize those into groups. So you've got another tab here for groups. So moving over here, I've got things broken up into 4 different groups here on my screen. You can expand and collapse these different groups as needed to show them on the screen. To create a new group, obviously, you've got the plus sign right here. That's where you would add a group, give the group a name, and I can either drag contacts either from my favorites or from other groups. You can have a contact in multiple groups if that makes sense. Or I can start typing in names here. So again, Scott, if I want to add him in here, I can do it that way. I'm going to go ahead and not create that group. I'm going to show you if you have an existing group and you want to make some changes to that group, you can select this group, this icon right here to get the details of the group. There's a few extra things you can do here. You can start a group chat. You can schedule a meeting with the people in the group. You can record and send a voicemail message to the members of that group. But most commonly, the option people are looking for is to edit the group, to add or remove other users from that group. So this brings you back to this screen here, where again, I can search for names to add them in here. I can drag people over here to add them in here. I can select the X if I want to take someone out of a group, save my changes, and that'll be applied over here on the groups. One other thing I want to show while we're working with contacts is the contact details and contact history. So I'm going to select a contact here. I'm going to select Scott again. And one thing that we do provide in the Mitel Connect client is a history of all of your interactions with this particular contact. So you'll see here I've got a history of the IM messages that I've exchanged with Scott here. I have a history of all of the calls that we've placed back and forth to each other, either outgoing calls to him, incoming calls from him, missed calls. show up here, and then in voicemail messages that I may have received from him that I still have in my mailbox. So you've got a history of all of your interactions with any particular contact that you click on, which is kind of nice. You can pick up an IM conversation from there and continue it if you want to. Next on the list, we have the recent calls. This one's real simply your call history, very similar to what you'd have on your cell phone, anything else like that. I've got a list of all the calls that I've placed with the icon up here that shows the kind of up and to the right, indicates that that's an outgoing call that I dialed. The down and to the left arrow here is an icon of a call that was placed inbound to me. And then again, the red kind of skip icon there indicates a call that I missed. Or you can sort for just the missed calls with the missed tab there. Take a look at those calls that way. Not a whole lot there. Again, of course, you can find anybody in the list there. You can select them. You can get the details of that contact again, call them, IM them, whatever you need to do. Moving down, the next thing on the list here is voicemails. This lists all the voicemail messages in your mailbox. You have tabs here for all voicemails. If you just want to sort to the unheard messages or the saved messages, you can do that. If you select one of your voicemail messages here, again, you're going to get details of your interactions with this contact. You're going to get the option to play the voicemail here. You can select whether or not you want to play that using your computer speakers or your desk phone. When you're playing the message, you will have the option as the message progresses to pause, pull that message back, and kind of repeat portions of the message as it's playing. Repeat that phone number that they might have said too quickly. You can forward the message to someone else. So when you do that, you forward the message, it gives you an opportunity here to, first of all, who do you want to forward it to? You can fill that in here, and then you have an option to record kind of a message, an introduction message on this voicemail before it goes to Scott. And then I can mark it as either urgent, which shows up as in his mailbox, obviously as an urgent message. I can mark it as private. That means he's not going to be allowed to forward that message again. And then I also have the option to request a receipt so that when he listens to that message, it'll let me know that it's been listened to. When you are looking at your messages, you can see this icon here indicates that that is a message that I have saved. That's what that icon there is. So if I come over to saved, I'm going to see that same message there. If I unsave that voicemail, come back here, it doesn't have that icon anymore. Next thing on the list as we go down is the messages, instant messages, or IM. This is where you're going to see all of your active IM conversations. So after a couple of days, a message is seen as kind of stale, and it removes it from this list. You can always get back to those, though, by going to your contacts, selecting a contact, and you'll have your IM message there, and you can pick things up there. Once you kind of reactivate this IM conversation, when you go to your messages, you'll see that here. You can select that, and you can continue that message there. Obviously, when you get a new message, you're going to see a number here that's going to show you the unread message, and you can click on it and go to it. And if you have notifications enabled, which I'll show you here in a bit, you're going to get either a sound or a pop-up notification that you got the new IM. Next on the list is the Events tab. Now, the Events tab only shows up if you have integration enabled with a Microsoft Exchange email server or Office 365 as your email server. So if the administrator of the system has enabled that, you'll have the option to integrate your Microsoft Exchange or Outlook calendar with this Events tab. So really what this is a two-way sync. This is displaying the same information that I would see in my Outlook calendar. You've got upcoming messages is kind of the default view that it starts you on. So it starts you with today, and you can scroll forward in time. If you want to look at things in the past, you have to select the other tab. And then when you scroll down, you're scrolling backwards in time. But it always starts you out with upcoming. And this is also where you can create a new event, if you're using the conference bridge feature in Mitel, you can create a new conference invite from here. So to show you what that looks like, I'm going to go ahead here and let's say we've got a, let's call it a sales meeting, and we can schedule that for later this week. And we can say, where it's going to be. Of course, most everything is remote now, so we'll select that option here. Options we have here, you can add additional organizers or presenters to the meeting. Notes, agenda, overview of the meeting. Typical meeting options you have down here, whether or not you're going to announce participants when they arrive. You can prompt the participant to record their name and play that name announcement when they join a meeting, or just a tone. Mute participants, show names, all those typical options. When you create the meeting, what it's going to do is it's actually going to open up a Outlook meeting invite. And here's what this looks like right here. And then you can, add the recipients that need to get this and send this and schedule this in Outlook. And then, of course, once that's scheduled in Outlook, that's going to show up in your upcoming events. And you'll be able to start the Mitel conference when that time comes up. The last option on here was a new feature that they've just added. This is meetings. This is a link to the My Team meetings, which is Mitel's cloud-hosted conference bridge. I don't have this enabled on the system, so I won't be able to show that. But that's what that's a link to start those meetings. All right. The next thing I wanted to show on here is some options that I kind of went over. I want to come back to your name. This actually opens up another menu. This is one that sometimes people don't realize there are options hidden by clicking on their name. If you select this, of course, you're going to see your details. This is also where you can assign your extension to either your desk phone, which is the default, soft phone. If you have soft phone enabled for your extension, you can turn that on. Soft phone is, of course, where you're going to use your computer's audio device, or maybe a USB headset that you have plugged into the computer as your audio device, and really it moves your extension off of your desk phone onto your computer. Your desk phone will show that it's currently anonymous and doesn't have an extension number anymore because your extension now lives on the computer. When you do that, you do have the option to choose. I don't think I have my headphone plugged in right now. You can select what audio device, or just use the Windows default. Or you can select to use external assignment. External assignment is another good option for people who might be working remote that don't have a USB headset, don't want to use soft phone for whatever reason. You can use external assignment, and when someone calls your extension, the calls will immediately be sent to your cell phone. Another really nice feature of external assignment is that you can use the Connect client here to dial a number, as we did before. Dial a number, select a contact, however you want to initiate the call. And that will actually set up a call to your cell phone first, and then when you answer your cell phone, it'll set up a second call to the person that you instructed the Connect client to call. What this does is this sends your office caller ID on that call, and it also allows you to use the Connect client to put that call on hold, conference in other people, transfer that call, all the same features you could do with your desk phone. You can do on your cell phone using external assignment and the Connect client for managing the call. Oh, actually, one thing I did want to show under external assignment, right here I have my cell phone number. I can edit this number if I want. Couple options I have here. I can give it a label. I can give it a number of rings to try. I recommend leaving that on 6 rings whenever you're doing external assignment, or if you're using simultaneous ringing features, additional phone features. Because what you're going to see happen is when the system decides to send you a call, the caller is waiting and they're hearing ringing, and you really lose about a ring and a half while the system is setting up a call, and the carrier your telephone carrier is accepting that call, and the cell phone network has to find where you are and get your cell phone ringing, and then of course you have to maybe pull your cell phone out of your pocket and answer it. So if you leave that on, like the default 3 rings, sometimes that can be a little too quick to actually answer the call. So we recommend, if you're doing external assignment or additional phones or simul ring, 5, 6, sometimes more rings usually works best for that. You can also have multiple numbers in here, so you can add, I think, up to 6 different external assignment numbers if you want. You can choose which ones. Maybe you've got your cell phone, home phone, whichever one works best at the time. You can select that. Further down the screen, you see My Conference. This is my reservation list conference. This is a conference bridge that every user that's using the Mitel service appliance or virtual service appliance and has the conference license, if the user is given permission to the conference bridge, they're going to have a reservation list conference. And this is a conference bridge that is essentially open all the time, doesn't have a schedule tied to it, and makes it easy to kind of do ad hoc conferences. If I'm on the phone with somebody and I want to elevate this into a screen share conference, I can do that with my conference details here. I can also easily copy these conference details. If I want to take this information, copy it to my clipboard, and insert that into an email and send that to someone to give them the instructions to dial into my conference bridge to do kind of an ad hoc or on the fly web conference. You can always add new conference bridge. If you want to add more than the default one, you can do that here. You can enter in a different, participant code, organizer code. All of these different settings are things that the administrator can control, whether or not you have the permission to change those things. And then the last thing on this page I want to show is this gear. This brings you to the settings. This is the same option you're going to have if you go up to the very top Connect menu and select Settings here. Another way to get here is clicking on your name and selecting the gear icon. And this is going to bring up the Connect Client settings. We have quite a few settings in here. Starting at the very top again, I want to show the account. Now, if you're AD integrated, doesn't really apply, but if I'm not AD integrated, I can change my password if I want to. I can see the server name that I'm connected to, what username I'm logged in with. The option most people are looking for here is to automatically launch the Mitel Connect client or the Mitel client, Mitel Connect when starting the computer. So that way you don't have to find the icon and start it every day. And then finally over here, the AD credentials, I want to show this tab. This is where you would enter, if you're not AD integrated, or if you're using Office 365, this is where you're going to enter the credentials that you use for Exchange, for your Outlook, to link this with your Exchange calendar, so that events tab that we just showed will be synchronized between your Outlook client and the Connect client. Or if for some reason you need to unlink that, this is where you're going to go to do that. All right, next thing in the settings, the call routing. This is probably the most useful. This is where probably the most common reason for coming into the settings is this is how you can adjust the availability states. I think they've done a really good job with the client here in making all the different features that apply to an availability state visible and easy to understand. So I can see here, starting off, when my availability state is available, which is your default normal availability state. I can see incoming calls are routed to my desk phone. Okay, that's what I want. I have no other phones set to simultaneously ring. After 5 rings, the calls are routed to my voicemail. I have no voicemail greeting recorded. Callers are allowed to leave a voicemail. That's a setting you can potentially change on your availability states. And then callers who press 0 during the voicemail greeting will be forwarded to the auto attendant. That's a nice feature where if you're going to be out of the office, you can, in your voicemail greeting, you can let callers know that if they press 0, they can be transferred. In this case, I'm sending them back to the auto attendant, our main menu. You can also send them to maybe a group for your department or a colleague that helps field calls for you. And then you can announce that option in your voicemail greeting so that people can get maybe a quicker response. If you want to change any of these settings, obviously you can select the option right over here, or you can start a wizard, which will walk you through each of those settings. So once again, starting out with simultaneously ringing, I can select this so that when my desk phone rings, it's also going to ring my cell phone. That's a nice feature for when you're maybe up and walking around the office and you don't want to miss a call. You can turn that on. Next thing, forward calls to my voicemail after 5 rings. You can set that obviously higher or lower. You can either keep ringing so that it never goes to voicemail, or you can always forward it somewhere. That's going to make more sense in maybe you're out of office or in a meeting availability state. Find me. Find me if you're not familiar with that. That's a voicemail feature where when someone is listening to your voicemail greeting, they can press 1 and reach any phone numbers that you have designated as your Find Me destinations. This is a feature that, once again, you can either announce in your voicemail greeting. You can say, hi, this is Steve. I'm away from my desk. If you'd like to try to find me on my cell phone, press 1. And then if they do press 1, the system will try to call my cell phone and see if I will accept the call. Otherwise, it's going to take that caller and continue to let them leave a voicemail message. You can also use this feature as kind of a hidden option, where you turn it on so that if someone presses 1 during your greeting, it's going to try to find you, but you don't necessarily have to announce it, and you can just let certain people know that if you get my voicemail, just press 1 and it'll come out to my cell phone. So that's another way that the Find Me feature gets used. And of course, my voicemail greeting, you have an option here to record your voicemail greeting. Make the recording. After you've made your recording, you hit stop, save your recording. Now I have a voicemail greeting there. Next, and then this is the option, can callers leave a voicemail? Maybe if you're going on an extended vacation, maybe you want to leave a message that says, I'm going to be out for 2 weeks and I'm not going to be taking any voicemail messages, and let people know that they can press 1 or press 0 to reach someone else in your office, and leave it at that. I've made these changes, so I click save, brings me back here. So I can see a summary. I can see it's changed now. That shows I do have a phone set to simultaneously ring. Also shows that I have a voicemail greeting recorded. Those are the changes we made here. You can see all your different availability states here. So for example, if we look at out of office, things are going to look a little bit different here. This shows that incoming calls are immediately routed to my voicemail rather than waiting 5 rings. So you can make sure that these different availability states are set the way you want it. And then the next tab over here is the power routing. Power routing is where you can create some rules that actually supersede your availability state routing. So when an incoming call reaches your extension, if you have any power routing rules enabled, the system's going to take a look at those first before looking at your availability routing. So in this case, I have a couple of rules I've set up in here. I have one called nighttime. If I take a look at that one, this says if the time is between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m., then forward the calls to my voicemail. So maybe I normally leave my phone in the available state, and I have a simul ring where it's additionally ringing my cell phone. But between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m., I don't want my office extension to ring at all or ring to my cell phone. So I have that automatically send calls to my voicemail. So it's going to do that even if I'm in my available state. The next one I have here is, I called it Brian Find Me. This is a colleague of mine. I have this one set up that when I have my phone in out of office mode and Brian tries to call me, it's going to automatically enable the Find Me and reach out to my cell phone and try to call me. So that way he won't get my voicemail. He's going to immediately just, the call will come out to my cell phone and allow me to take that call. And then the final one I have here, I named Wife Override. This one is if I receive a phone call from my wife, I can play a different ringtone. So that's an option you have there to match a specific caller ID and get notified about that call. So it will, going back to the list of our power routing rules, it's going to look at these rules in kind of a top-down order. So if I wanted the kind of Brian Find Me feature here, if I wanted that to take place between the hours of 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. when I'm sending calls to voicemail, I could move that rule to the top and let that one take precedence. If the call doesn't match any of these rules, so it's not from Brian, it's not from my wife, and it's not between 12 and 6 a.m., then we're going to come back to our availability routing, look at what availability state we're in right now, and do whatever we have set on this page. So just remember, those power routing rules do get processed before the call looks at what your available state is. Back to the settings navigation. Next thing on the list is the voicemail tab. A couple things that we do get asked about on this. Once again, the voicemail password. If you want to change your voicemail password, obviously the administrator can do it through Director, but for a user, they can come in here to their settings, voicemail, change your voicemail password here. You can also record your name for your default voicemail greeting. Recording your name is very important. It's the first thing if you have a new extension that a user is prompted to do the first time they log into their voicemail. Rather than record a voicemail greeting that applies to a specific availability state, it asks you to record your name, and at that point it just wants your name, and it uses that with the default voicemail greeting. So no matter what state you're in, the system can say, you've reached the voicemail for, and then it will play the name announcement that you've recorded. Or if you forward a voicemail to someone else, it will, and you don't record kind of the preamble voicemail message when you forward the message, it'll say, you've received a forwarded voicemail from, and it'll play your recorded name. So that applies to all availability states, and that's why it's out here on its own under the voicemail settings. Escalation is where when you receive a voicemail, you can choose to have the system try to notify you about that voicemail in a couple of different ways. You can send an email notification about that voicemail. You can also send a phone notification about that voicemail, and it will keep trying until that voicemail is checked. So this is kind of more usually applies to like a support mailbox, an emergency mailbox, maybe an employee call out line, something like that. I don't see too many users turning that on an individual user mailbox. Usually a group mailbox is where we see the escalation profiles. And then finally, under the Outlook tab, we have an option here to show my voicemails in line in my Outlook inbox. This is an option I wanted to bring up because it does create some confusion. There's a few different ways. Well, there's two different ways you can get voicemails to show up in your Outlook email inbox. So this is one way. If I select show voicemails in line in my Outlook inbox, what this is going to do is this links the Outlook software on my desktop to the Mitel Connect Client software on my desktop, and it really just puts a shortcut in my Outlook to the voicemail, to the Connect client. So I'll see an item pop up in my Outlook, and I click on it, and it's going to play the message, but it's really just doing that through the Connect Client software on my desktop. It's not really creating a new email. It's just a link that exists within Outlook. It's not an email that goes out to your Exchange server or to your Office 365 server, which means that if you have this option enabled, that message is not going to be playable, or it's not going to show up if you're checking your voicemail from like your smartphone or webmail or those sort of things. To do that, since we're talking about that, I'm going to skip down here to notifications. And under notifications, I have an option here to send an email notification about incoming voicemail. And it's going to send that to my email address. And I also have an option, a couple of sub options here. Do I want to attach a WAV file with that voicemail, or just have an email notification that lets me know, kind of who left it and what time? And then do I want to mark that message as heard when I've sent that email? But this option will actually send an email that will make it through to your webmail client, to your smartphone client. The WAV file you'll be able to play when you're not connected to Outlook on your desktop. If you have both of them enabled, sometimes that creates some confusion because you'll see two different notifications in Outlook every time you get a new voicemail message. One will be this link that takes place between Outlook and the Connect client right here, and one will be the actual email message. So I just wanted to point out the difference between the two because we get quite a few questions about that. The IM, really the only option here is we do have an option to create what they call canned IM responses. You can create a few different, as many different messages as you have here. And then when you receive an incoming call, let me show you an incoming call and show you where you can apply those canned messages here. Oh, I'm sorry. I left myself in out of office mode, so I'm not going to be able to get a call here. Let's turn that off. All right, so now I can see that I have an incoming call coming in here to my extension. And that option. Oh, no, that only applies to internal extensions. I'm sorry. There's an icon missing there, and I don't have a phone to dial into this simulated call, but there's another icon that pops up here where I can respond to an internal call with a canned IM response.
I can dial in if you want. What do you want? You want me to send something to you?
Yeah, if you just want to call me from your phone to extension 1455 here.
Done.
All right, well, I must have broken something here.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's like a demo glitch there. It happens once in a while. No,
Yeah,
no worries.
yeah, a little bit. I've been playing around with this extension quite a bit here, so that worked a couple hours ago, but I'll definitely follow up with a screenshot of that feature once I see what's going on there. But yeah, essentially it's just a quick way to, let's say I'm on, in a meeting and someone internally is trying to reach me. I can respond to them with an IM response of the choices that I have here. Moving down video, you have a couple different options if you're using video. Now, video calling is something that we do with the Mitel Connect client. Once again, if you have the feature enabled for the user and turned on, and the user has to be using the soft phone client to do video calling between two extensions. Outlook settings. So again, a couple different settings here. One is to sync my Exchange calendar with my Mitel Connect availability modes. This is another one that we do get quite a few questions about. By default, when you install the Mitel Connect client, it's going to enable that option. And when you have an item on your Outlook calendar, your phone is automatically going to switch your availability state to in a meeting. When Outlook shows you as out of office, and Outlook actually does have, like down here, there's work hours defined in Outlook. You can define what your typical working day is. And if you have that option enabled, it will automatically put your phone in out of office, say at 5 o'clock every day. Some people don't want that feature on, and they don't understand why their phone might be changing the availability state. This is the checkbox that enables that. So if you do have the Exchange calendar integration turned on, so you've got your events over here, that means that you can also have this feature turned on where it'll change your availability state automatically if you want it to do so. You also have an option when you have these Outlook Exchange integration enabled. On each Outlook calendar item, you can select what availability state you want to be in for that appointment. And it can automatically change it that way. You also have an option here to sync my Outlook contacts. I usually have that turned on, but I turned that off earlier in testing. But this will allow me to search up here in the quick dialer and find any of my Outlook contacts, as well as the people that are extensions on my Mitel system, and of course the public contacts from my Exchange system. Notifications we quickly looked at because we were talking about voicemail and whether or not we want to send an email notification. We also have options here for sound notifications. So for example, I can have my computer set to play a sound maybe when I get a new voicemail, different options here. I like to have this turned on for an IM. So if I get a new IM message, I have it set here to play an alert, and then I can select what alert I want to have it play, which sound I want to have it play. Same thing for a new IM message in an existing conversation. I have that playing the same sound. So the way these sound alerts work is you select the event, like maybe a call from an internal number. I have that set to no alert, so my computer will not play a sound because obviously if someone's calling me, my phone's going to play a sound, so I don't need the computer to do so. But for IM, it's nice to have an audio alert come on and let you know that you got a new IM message. In addition to the sounds, we can also do a notification pop-up, kind of the Windows notification that pops up from the tray, from the Windows system tray. I can get an incoming notification for an incoming call. Shows the caller ID. I can select how long it's going to display that notification on screen for. If I get a IM message, how long that's going to be on screen. Voicemail, screen sharing request. Have all those turned on because I want to be notified about those. Soft phone, the one option, the only option we have here is what audio device are we going to use. So if you do have multiple audio devices, you can select that here. You can also do the same thing as we showed from my personal settings tab there, and then enable auto gain control. This is a setting that's not on by default, but does seem to help out with kind of normalizing volume in the soft phone so that the volume is more consistent. We found that setting can make things sound a little better, so that's a good one to enable. And then of course the on startup assignment of soft phone. For some people that are going to be using soft phone on a long-term basis, it makes sense to go ahead and turn that on so that you don't have to come into the soft phone every day and re-enable the soft phone setting. Because if your computer restarts and you don't have that enabled, it's going to have you back on whatever your primary extension is when the software starts again. Those are the things I wanted to show inside settings. One other feature I wanted to show in the Connect client is the toolbar feature. So the toolbars are something that you have to enable as a user. So once again, at the very top under the Connect menu, we have an option to show the toolbar. So as soon as I turn that on, if you have not had that enabled before and have not used that, you're going to see the toolbar opens up, but it says you have no toolbar buttons configured. And at the very bottom, it gives me a little note here to let me know I can add buttons to the toolbar by clicking here, and I'm going to click this, and it's going to open up another window. Now the toolbar buttons available to me are something that the system administrator has to make available to the users. So all these toolbar buttons and the different functions that they can do are configured in the Connect Director by a Connect Director admin. These buttons can be configured in groups and then assigned to different user groups. So I can take a collection of 24 different buttons in a client toolbar, and I can assign that to one or more user groups in the Mitel Connect system. I can also go to an individual user under the programmable buttons option, and I can program available toolbar buttons for just that single user if there's some functions that just they want to use. Maybe it's a contact center supervisor that wants to have buttons for launching the contact center supervisor applications. Might be something that you don't want to apply to everyone. So I can choose what buttons as a user out of this list that the administrator has made available to me. So I'm going to select a few here. A lot of these are buttons that are similar to what you're going to see under the contacts, where it shows who's on the phone, or it shows when a contact's on the phone, off the phone, what their availability state is. Some of them are functions that might be handy. So I've got a few buttons enabled here. I can close this window. Now that I have some toolbar buttons, one button that's handy is if you are using like the Connect Contact Center, you can create a button here that will launch a URL. Of course, this could be any URL that makes sense in your system. Bring that over so I can log into my contact center as an agent. That's a handy button. The rest of these buttons I have here, this shows me that Sam is currently on the phone. I can see that. I can click to call these other contacts. If I have a live call, I've got a function where I can transfer that call to a mailbox with an easy one click. Or if I want to use the park or unpark feature, I gave myself a button to do an unpark. But that is how you, first of all, you have to enable the toolbar by putting a check mark next to the Show Toolbar option in the very top Connect menu. And then finally hit the plus sign. You can also come back here and remove buttons, add other buttons anytime you want. And once you have those set for the user, or once the user has those set for themselves, those are going to stay on there. One interesting thing I saw is that you can actually add up to 140 buttons to the client toolbar. That seems like a lot to manage, but I thought that was an interesting fact there. Those are all the features that I had on my list to cover with everyone today. Take a look and see if we have any questions. If you do have any questions, please feel free to get those posted up and we can get those addressed.
Excellent stuff, Steve. I'm really glad you showed a lot of those, and a lot of those are things that you don't do every day, and so if you're not familiar with them, you just kind of lose. It's like use it or lose it. So I'm glad you covered a lot of those lesser known features. I would say that the find me, follow me, or the find me function and the call forwarding functions are the ones that I think are the most commonly used. And the only little gotcha I would say there on this is that if you're using the find me function and you set those rings like Steve showed you, and your cell phone is set to answer faster, then your cell phone, your voicemails can end up in your cell phone instead of ending up in your corporate voicemail. So just make sure you look at those rings, just like Steve had mentioned. I think that's an important thing to keep an eye on. And typically you lose at least one ring, sometimes two, because it takes 6 seconds. That's a ring is about 6 seconds to connect a call to another trunk and send it out. So I think Steve did a great job of covering that, but I just say I would recommend, if you plan on using that heavily, to do a trial run yourself, set it up, call from another phone, make sure it works the way that you want in terms of number of rings and stuff. And then once you get it the way you like, you can just kind of rinse and repeat and do it again and again. But Steve's example is the ideal one. Just keep in mind that rings number is important.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Don. Thanks.
Also, I would say one last thing on the escalation. I know that we talked about that typically being for groups. We do have another video recording on our YouTube channel where we go more in depth on escalation profiles and talk about escalation profiles in more depth and detail. If you want to go one-on-one with us on that, let us know. But to me, one of the best things about escalation profile is it's also a nice way just to make sure you get an email notification of your voicemails if you're in a spotty cell area, or you want to just make sure you're waiting on an important call, that kind of thing. All that stuff is very good to do for escalation profiles. And then lastly, I love the example Steve gave about power call routing in terms of overriding, like the call, Brian sends in to find me. If his wife calls, it kind of does a different ring and barges in. Another example I would give you on these power rules is sometimes we're playing phone tag with somebody, and even though we give them, our cell phone and our landline and tell them when to call which and when you're available, people that are busy, they don't, get all of it, and they just call at the wrong time. I would say that you could also use that as a, hey, I really need this call, so I'm going to set an override. And my example was I was getting my windshield on my car replaced, and even though I gave him my cell phone number, told him to call me on my cell phone number, he kept calling my landline, and I was in these video calls with my phone set to end a meeting all the time. So I finally got this guy's caller ID, popped it in my override, and that way I made sure, no matter what was going on, I could get his call, because he just would not call my cell for some reason. So that's a great trick and tip to use. And in the past, in 14.2 forever ago, you had to have professional communicator, which was a fee, like an upgrade to get this feature. Now it's in the base license, so there's no charge for that feature. Hey, Steve, if you don't mind, could you pivot back to that contacts tab for a second, and then go to the large view where you see the contacts in a larger state? And I did have some people ask about this. I wanted to, you can just hit Let's View, and people asked me about the appearance of these, and they were confused. I was initially as well about why things look differently. Like on Ryan's, you see it's got Ryan Arellano, and there's a little RA in a circle, and there's a green circle around it, and it says he's available. That green circle around it shows his chat status. And the reason that's there is if a person isn't running the Connect client live on their PC, their chat status will be inactive. So if you look at mine here, I've got a cordless phone and I've got a landline at 1450, a couple down. My cordless is not associated with the PC. It has no instant messaging. My landline is associated with my PC, and that's why there's a green circle around it letting you know my IM is available. So that's the explanation as to why those images look that way. The circle around that icon is your instant messaging chat status. If you go to the smaller view and you look at the tiny view that you had earlier, it's still there. There's it's, my vision is not getting any better as I get older, right? But there is still a circle around the circle. So you can still see it. It's just a little more nuanced there. One quick question did come in. This one's from Greg. Greg asks, Active Directory integration was mentioned a few times. When I asked him about enabling it, I was told not to. That's a great question, Greg. I think what I'd like to do is have Steve call you to talk to you about it. The main reason maybe would be if you have multiple domains and they cross multiple domains, then you might not want to. Otherwise, I think it's a good option. So I in our own network here, as an example, I am using Active Directory integration, but I know that Steve and some of the other Mitel techs are not, because the way they use their client is different, because they're techs and they're doing different things with it. So let us call you and we'll walk you through the specifics in your environment as to why or why not use Active Directory integration. So we'll ping you back about that shortly, okay?
Yeah, I'd be happy to give you a call about that, Greg. But yeah, in most cases, I'd say it's a good idea. It definitely can make things a bit easier for users. So we'll definitely look at your specific situation.
Yeah, and that's a good question to ask. I'm glad you stuck around for that. Appreciate your participation, and we hope to see you next time. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.